So there is a strong spiritual connection to the assumed name certificate. And if you don't have a grounding in that, you're not going to be able to function very well in this contracts-based society. It is a realm of commerce, and you are actually operating in fraud until you understand what I'm getting ready to explain to you. So in part one of this particular video, we talked about what is called lordship salvation. And here's how this works. Sin and debt are synonymous, okay? A sin is a debt with God. And Jesus died on a cross. The highest form of payment is blood. Now, imagine that I go pay your gas bill. I just go to the gas company and I say, from here on out, this man or this woman's gas bill is paid for. Okay, use this debit card, put it on this debit card. It will always have funds on it. It's completely paid for. Now you find out about that and you go down to the gas company and you say to the gas folks, hey, I know that my debt has been paid, but I don't think that's sufficient. I want to pay more. That is what they're tricking you into doing in the modern churchian movement. Okay, this is something that was brought in by a guy named, I think, John MacArthur, and it's called lordship salvation. What it basically means is even though your debt has been paid for and you can no longer accumulate any debt, you still try to pay the debt off. You see how wrong that is? So what they teach you, what they're very subtly teaching you in modern churches, is that salvation must be earned, when in truth it's already paid for. But what if I told you the legal system does the same thing? Everything's been paid for. You just have to know how to stand on it. It's a parallel lie, one in the church and one in the courtroom. Okay. And both of them come from the same spiritual source. So I'm going to show you how registering the name that you're using, the legal name, is the legal system's version of lordship salvation, where everything's been paid, but you're told you have to continue paying. Does this sound important? Because it is. It's why you end up in jail. It's why you have pay taxes that you probably don't rightfully have it, get sued successfully for debts. There's a lot behind this, but it's actually very simple. So we know that you were born. Like we can all agree on that, right? If you're watching this video, you were born. And after that, your mom or your dad, or maybe both, did some paperwork. What is some of the paperwork that was done? Well, one of the things that was done is an application for a certificate of live birth. Okay. I'm not going to call that a birth certificate because I think it gets confused with the private certificate that the hospital gives you, where they do the whole thing with the footprints on in the ink pad, and they put the baby's footprint on the certificate. That is a birth certificate in the private. But the one that you're going to get next comes from the state. It's called a certificate of live birth, and that's got the legal name on it. Now, that legal entity is not the name that was registered with that certificate. The certificate of live birth does not register a name. It registers an event. The event that it registers is the birth. They're only registering the birth. They're not registering the name. Okay. And so what is a legal name? I know we have an Amish classroom here and that folks are all at different parts, and it's always good to hear again the basic stuff, right? So a legal name is a name that's first, middle, last. Now the ironic thing is, on many forms that you fill out in the public, what is the very first block? The first block's the last name oftentimes. You see how they mix everything up? It's confusion. So the legal name isn't just a label, okay? The legal name is a legal entity. That's why they call it a legal name, all right? Your private name is different. The legal entity is a fiction. Now, granted, the private name is a fiction also. We have to understand that all names are fictional. If I wanted to call a salt shaker something else, as long as I could get everyone to agree to change the name to that same thing, then that would be fine, right? We could call a salt shaker a Boomba block. And if everybody did it, it'd work out fine. All names are fictional. Okay. So there really is no such thing in this realm as a real name. You have a private name. And how's the private name work? So let's just take the name John Edward and then the family name Dosen. Okay. What we generally call the last name in the private is the surname or the family name, Dosen. And then you have got a given name. Some people call it a Christian name or a Christian given name, but that's the name you were given. That's John Edward. The the family name you inherited, the given name you were given. But that is a private name. Most folks stylistically put it John dash Edward, and then they'll put a colon or something like that. Or you can just put words. You can just say John Edward of the Dosen family, John Jacob of the Smith family, Cindy Roberts of the Smith family, right? So the name is not you. Let's do a little algebra here. Y'all know algebra, A equals B. So B equals A, right? So A equals B. But let's just say A equals B and B equals C. Well, then A equals C, right? Got it. What is a name? A name is a collection of sounds and symbols. What are you? Are you the name? Because if you are the name and the name is a collection of sounds and symbols, then you are a collection of sounds and symbols. We know that's not true. See, the great thing about the stuff that we teach is you inherently already know it. You just have to cognizantly recognize it. Okay. That name is a vessel. It's actually a transmitting utility. It's used to transmit energy. Think about this. If I go to California and you are in Germany and the right court orders are in place, you can garnish my wages in California and have them come to you in Germany. You're basically collecting my energy, my labor. So just like a gas line or an electric line is a transmitting utility, the legal name is also a transmitting utility. Um, in very real ways, the private name is a transmitting utility too. It just transmits stuff between the living man and the rest of the world. So what's happening is you are a living, breathing soul. You have a body, you have a soul, you have a spirit. When you come into this realm, when you're birthed by the doc, right, you get a given name. You got the family name, which is the family you come from, and then you've got the given name. And that's a transmitting utility. For instance, what did your mom yell right before she transmitted a SWAT to your bottom when you were a child? She yelled the name. It got the communication goes through the name to the man or woman. Because if you have 20 men or and women standing in a crowd and you yell out one of their name and then say something to them, you have to communicate through the name. Okay. So your parents created the private name. Then in the SS5, which is an application for a social security number, and they also get the hospital usually gets the permission from the parents to also file for the certificate of live birth and the social security number at the same time. The name gets converted. It gets converted from a Christian given name and a surname or family name to a legal name, which is a first, middle, last. Okay. So if somebody asks for your last name, they're actually asking for the legal name. And in fact, if any public entity asked you for a name, they're asking for a legal name. They can't recognize the private name. So there's a trap in here. That name is not yours. That legal name was created by who? The government, which is why if you look on the certificate of live birth, there's a corporate entity at the top, like state of Tennessee, state of Indiana, Commonwealth of Virginia, right? That name was created so that you could be entered into a commercial system. And it's a very well designed system that tricks you with a trick so obvious that it took me a little while after I saw it to actually inherently understand what was happening. But it's fairly simple. It's actually so simple that it's hard to see. It's kind of like saying, "Are you the name?" If I write a name on the board that happens to show up on, say, a driver's license that you possess, and I say, "Is this you?" We're trained to say, "Yes, that's me." That was trained into us in the public school Prussian education system. So you've been given a legal entity. Okay. Now that entity can be taxed, licensed, sued, or summoned. But there's no connection between that entity and you yet. What happens when you turn 18? You take that name and you start going into commerce. You become of legal age and you go into commerce and you start using it, but you're using it fraudulently. Why? How is it you're using it fraudulently? Because in order to do business in this world, that you have to have a registered business name. If you don't have a registered business name, then you're using the name fraudulently. Now, you may say, but there's no law requiring me to register it. And you'll be right. You don't have to. It's voluntary. But that doesn't mean there's not consequences for it. The consequence we're going to get to. First, I want to show you something. You often hear the argument that the courts are working in admiralty law. In actuality, this entire commercial system is working in admiralty law. There's the whole theory, we'll call it a theory. I think it's quite plain and obvious that the gold fringe around the flag is this in the court is a signifier of admiralty. And people say, well, that's just silly. We're not on a ship. Well, then why do you have citizenship? If someone asks you what your citizenship is, don't you give them the name of a vessel? United States, France, aren't those vessels? Don't those entities have credit ratings? Aren't they businesses? Isn't the United States of America a corporation? And so I'm going to show you where in federal law it actually says that. Okay. Um, so when you are out on the seas of commerce, you have to be flying a flag. Okay. All ships must have a flag. If you don't have a flag on your ship, it's a pirate ship. And even in modern maritime law, a pirate ship can be sunk by any vessel, any registered vessel, without any consequences whatsoever. There's no consequences to sinking it. When a ship flies a flag, it's signifying that it is in our commercial system. And it's got identifiers on it. You'll see the name of the ship and probably numbers. And if something happens, if that ship runs into your ship and everybody just keeps going their own way, you'll know who to take the damages to because you have identification for that ship. So why must you register a name that you're doing business with? Well, imagine if all these businesses were unregistered and you wanted to go sue that business, you wouldn't be able to because you wouldn't be able to identify them. So let's look at a couple things here. I'm going to enable screen sharing. And we are going to look at a document that is very interesting. Now, this was written by an attorney, and it is called the Kentucky Assumed Name Certificate. Name statute, the Kentucky Assumed Name Statute. This is the name of this document, and it is a very good document. It was written by an attorney, and Thomas E. Rutledge. Thomas E. Rutledge is the attorney. Margaret Megan Walton, she is a like a law professor or something. You can go look them up. But let's read through this real quick, so that when I say that you're using the name in admiralty, you don't think I'm just talking conspiracy theory. So right here it says the Kentucky Assumed Name Statute was significantly revised in 2006, okay? With the objectives of one, ordering and rationalizing what are called real names, clarifying the county where the certificate of assumed name is to be filed, and clarifying the amendment and survival of certificates of assumed name. Basically, they're clarifying a bunch of stuff. But why certificates of assumed name? The purpose of the assumed name statute is to preclude sailing under false colors so that persons doing business may know who is the real party to the transaction. And this is in case law, in a case called Monday versus Mayfair Diagnostic Lab. You can look that case up. The court set forth the purpose of the assumed name statute, namely to inform members of the public, including appellants, of the identity of persons doing business under an assumed name. If an individual does business with XYZ, he or she is entitled to know that XYZ is the assumed name of this company called 123 Inc. Now look at this here. The Monday's court explanation of the purpose of the assumed name statute is consistent with the prior Attorney General opinion. Therein, the purpose of the assumed name statute was described as: we believe that its purpose is to permit persons a means of discovering the true identity of the parties with whom they are doing business, and accordingly to prevent fraud and deception by business entities which seek to sell under false colors. Okay, anyone who wants to say that I am insane for talking about ships and admiralty and sailing under false flags and pirate ships, that is the court that said that. The name is a ship. It is a citizen ship. And that citizenship is a transmitting utility. And you have to know who's on the other side of it. If you don't know who's on the other side of it, commerce is not accountable at all. So if I ran over you in my car, but I had a pirate flag on it, who would you tell the cops who ran over you? Right? So you've been tricked. They call us individuals. And we are led to think that an individual is a single man or a single woman. And I mean single like one, not single like not married. So, what are the entities involved here? Okay, let's just name them. Number one, you have a living, breathing soul, you have a body, and a spirit. Those three things so far: living, breathing soul, body, spirit. You come into this world, the body, and pretty soon you're given a private name. Uh, John Edward of the Dosen family. You inherit the family name and you're given the given name, hence given name. And then the government creates another entity for you to do business with. Okay, so the private name is in the republic. If you're in the U.S., it's in the private. The private is the republic. It's a different jurisdiction. In the public, you've got the democracy, and that legal name that you were that was applied to that birth registration is the name you started using in business, but you never registered it. Okay. So by not registering it, you've agreed to be an individual. They're taking all these entities, the soul, living, breathing soul, the spirit, the body, the private name, and the legal name, and they're bundling them all together into one thing called an entity, an individual, rather, an individual. And you can call it a private individual, you can call it a public individual, it doesn't matter, it's an individual. Okay. The name itself, that public name, is a person. You're not a person. If I look at you and say, are you a person? We've been trained to say yes, but that is not true. The only way it can be true is if you agree to it. You can call me a salt shaker if you want, or a cow. It doesn't matter. If we all both agree to it, then I guess we can both pretend it. Okay. So how does all this relate to what we spoke of earlier, the lordship salvation? Okay. So someone paid for all your debt. You accepted that offer. We're just going to assume you accepted that offer. You accepted Jesus' offer. The debt is paid. Now you're being told that you have to work for it. You have to go do all these things in order to earn that salvation. It's called salvation by works. If you have to work for something that's already been prepaid, does that sound coherent? Because it's not. It's a trick. It's a way for the church and for society or whatever governing entity to get control of you so that they can try to control your behavior, right? Now, in the public with this legal name, we're going to go over some definitions. But once you separate yourself via a bona fide government document from that public entity, it has a profound effect. Think of it like this. If you and I sit down to play Monopoly and there's a shoe on the board and you're saying that shoe is my pawn piece, okay, that's the piece I'm going to move around the board in this game of Monopoly. Are you the shoe? Because if the shoe goes to jail and you're the shoe, you're going to jail. Make sense? So let's look at some definitions here. And the definitions we're going to look at are legal definitions. So we're going to take the path of going through their definitions. And I'm going to do screen sharing here so you can actually see the definitions that I've typed out, because these definitions are taken straight from Black's Law Dictionary. So let's look at the name person, the word person. The word person is very important because all laws cover persons. So obviously we need to know what a person is to determine whether or not we are persons. In general usage, a human being. Oh, okay. Are you a human being? Well, what is a man? We know what a man is. Well, okay, I may have went too far there. That might get me banned. But what is a human? Have you ever heard of the phrase color of law? That's when you try to give the color of law to something that isn't law. What do you think the word hue stands for? Maybe hue for like color? So maybe a human is a color of man. It's not really a man. Why would you say human being or the state of being a colored man, which is totally has nothing to do with the color of your skin, when you could just say man? Why don't they say that a person is a man? Because it is not. A natural person. Well, in the legal sense, that legal name is a natural person. Though by statute term may include labor organizations, partnerships, associations, corporations, legal representatives. Okay, so what they're doing here, they're now listing all these business entities. All these are business entities. Okay. So if all these are business entities, bankruptcies, bank trustees in bankruptcy, receivers, partnerships, associations, corporations, then wouldn't that mean if all this is the definition of person, that a person is basically just a corporation? Let's look at the word corporation. Let's spell it correctly. An artificial person. A corporation is an artificial person. So a person is a corporation, and a corporation is an artificial person. You see how they get you running your tail in these definitions? Or a legal entity. By the way, in the legal arena, the word or and the word and are used synonymously. Created by or under the authority of the laws of a state. There you go. The legal person is a person, which is a corporation, which is an artificial person. All right. A corporation is an artificial person. Well, all persons are artificial. An individual as a noun, this term denotes a single person, a single entity, but it still doesn't make it real. As distinguished from a group or class, and also very commonly a private or natural person. So an individual is a natural person. An individual is a person. A person is a corporation. A corporation is a legal entity. You see where we're going here, right? Identity, evidence of sameness. So when a police officer asks for a driver's license and points at it and says, "Is this you?" If you hand them that ID, that identity, and you say, "Yes, this is me," which is going to be assumed, right? Then what happens? You're saying you are a person, and you have no evidence that you aren't, but you have plenty of evidence that you are. You've also probably been agreeing to it this whole time. Identification is proof of identity, and identity is evidence of sameness. Evidence of sameness. Are you a piece of plastic card, two-dimensional, image? No, you're not. Are you go and look up man or woman in Black's Law? Well, we can't because it's not there. Citizen. One who, under the constitutional laws of the United States or a particular state, is a member of a political community. There you go. A citizen is a person belonging to a political entity. All right. What is citizenship? It's the status of being a citizen. There are four ways to acquire it. By birth in the United States. Now, where's the United States? Now, we're tricked to think that the United States is an conglomeration of states. And if we're in one of the states, it's part of the United States. Now, in the democracy, that's true. In the republic, it's not. In the democracy, the Commonwealth of Kentucky is a subsidiary corporation of the United States of America. Okay. There you go. Where is actually the United States? The United States is actually technically, strictly speaking, the District of Columbia. Were you born in the District of Columbia? When you say born in, what does that mean? Does it mean that does it mean that your body was born in a geographical area? Or does it mean you were born into a body politic? So, really quick, let's look at one other thing. I want you to see how they define United States in state code. It's 28 USC subsection here. Let's let you read it. All right. This is 28 USC subsection 3002 definitions. Okay. It's just one of their definitions of the United States. You go down to 15. And what does it say right here? It says the United States means a federal corporation, an agency, department, commission, board, or other entity of the United States, an instrumentality of the United States. So, what is the United States? It is a corporation. There you go. Are you a corporation? Are you the shoe that's going around the Monopoly board? Because if you are the shoe, then you're a person. And if you're a person, you're an individual. And what do all the laws apply to? So let's think about this for just a second. They trick us in the spiritual arena by making us think we have to continue to pay a debt that has already been paid for. Watch the first video to the series. If you skip that, then by all means, I recommend you go back and watch it to talk about this in depth. But what's happening with the name? You're being tricked into thinking that you are the name. You're saying you are the name. That means all those entities are combined into an individual. And since the laws apply to the legal name, and you're saying all this is the legal name, then the laws apply to all this. That's why they can repossess the body and put it into warehousing, i.e., jail, right? Or prison. What happens when you register the name? You're splitting that off. You have a document that, if appropriately registered with the right entity, shows that you're separate from the name. So let's talk about that a little bit more in detail. All right. Now, let's just say you're in a car driving down the road and you get pulled over by a police officer. I think we can all relate to that, right? Do they call it a car or a truck? No, they call it a motor vehicle. Okay, that's just a legal term. But what do they say? They say the laws are written such that any person that operates a motor vehicle must have a license, right? Any person. Now you're really gonna have to work to get the idea out of your head that you're not a person, unless you want to be a person, in which case you're in the wrong place. Just continue being a person. Let me know how that works out for you, but you don't need this info. Now, if if the business isn't registered, they're going to say the driver behind that wheel is a person. They're going to assume that. But if the business is registered, and let's just assume there's no license, can they hold the man or woman and say, well, you don't have a driver's license? Can a business drive? Is it possible for a business to drive? If you can prove that that name is a business, if you have proof that it's a business, if someone comes to my door, knocks on it and says, I have paperwork for John Edward Dosen, I can't legally or morally say, I am John Edward Dosen, because I'm not. It's a business. It's registered as a business. The state recognizes it as a business. It has a business bank account. It has an EIN number. So it's a business. I have all this evidence that it is a business. So if I were to say, do you have evidence that I am John Edward Dosen? They're probably just going to look at me and I'm going to say, well, I have evidence that I'm not. For the very first time after registering that name, you're going to have evidence to prove that you aren't the person. The person is who typically would apply for a license. And you can prove that's not you. Okay? It's a registered business entity. How can they regulate that business in the act of driving when a business can't drive? So, persons, if they are business entities, they can't be guilty of a crime because a business can't do anything. It's very simple. It's actually the totally opposite of the way our minds have been trained to think the system works. Okay. I mean, think of how many times in school you signed your name to the paper, first, middle, last name, right? The training began very, very early. And what's happened is you've contracted unknowingly, and you have to undo those contracts, or at least do the contracts correctly. And we get into that in other videos. You've got to give back what you know you don't need and is not you. Okay. Or you have to enter into the contracts in a way that you're not contracting to be the entity, to be the person. So in most states, and I'm not saying you should go register the name and then cancel the driver's license. You don't have to. There's ways to do this correctly. But let's just say you want to cancel a driver's license. They call it surrendering. So you go in, you fill out a form. It's actually an affidavit. You hand the license back to them. They'll punch a hole in it and they'll try to give it back to you. So if they invalidated it and they're trying to give it back to you, because what they'll say is, well, you might need it for ID. They want you to be a person. But isn't that an inducement to commit fraud? They'll say things like, well, you might need it to cash a check. Well, that's fraud. They don't want you to surrender that. So you carry it around in your wallet and you have evidence in your wallet that you're a person, and you shouldn't be doing that if you don't want to be a person. Now, I'm not saying you can't have a license, you can. There's ways to get the license and separate yourself from the person. Okay. But some people, if they're really morally convicted, won't have the license. Okay. They just don't want to lose you as a customer, because if you're a customer, it has to be voluntary. And if it's voluntary, why do you have to have it to begin with? Because you thought you needed it. I mean, everyone in this world seems to be following someone else. Stop it. Don't be a follower. Don't even follow me. And don't even believe me. Think through this stuff for yourself. You have to. Because if you don't think through it, you don't really know who you are. You'll still be trying to perform works to get your salvation. You have to know this stuff. And you are the only one who can know it and look into the law and boil it down for yourself. Okay. So a lot of folks understand at this point that we kind of advocate, if you're going to register the name, register it in Minnesota, the state of Minnesota. Why? Well, the state of Minnesota is the only one that really does it right. If you do it in other states, you're going to have to be careful because they like to trick and trap you into continuing to be a person. And we have a whole course out for that that I can give you the link to, or you can find the link in the bottom of this video. So they are saying in these assumed name certificate laws, go look up the law for your state, that you don't have to file if the legal name and the business name are the same. Okay. Basically, a sole proprietorship. They're saying you don't have to file. You don't need to, but you can. And you may want to. What they should be telling you when they give you that your parent, that certificate of live birth is, if they were going to be honest, which they're not, they should be saying, now, when this young man or woman turns the age of 18, this must be registered, because this is not registering anything more than the act of the birth. It's registering an event. That's it. So you're not supposed to be using an unregistered name in business. Do you use the legal name in business? Yes, you do all the time. Does the legal name have a credit rating? Can a man or woman have a credit rating? When you say my credit rating is too low, don't you mean your person's credit rating is too low? Or you need to raise your person's credit rating? I know it's a little clumsy in speech, but you almost need to do it just so you can learn it. And it's not hard to learn something new. It's hard to unlearn the old stuff that isn't true. So what they're actually doing is they're mixing something we don't need to do with something that we do need to do. And they're saying that the one thing we need to do is permissive, that registering of the legal name. It's permissive. You don't have to do it. Meaning, what they're meaning is you don't really need to do it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. But what are they doing? You don't want to be a pirate ship in commerce. And so what they're saying here is you don't have to register that name. But if you don't, then what you're doing is you're assuming to be a person. And we've created all these laws and statutes to control persons. That way you don't have to worry about registering that name. So you have a choice. You register the name and you separate the legal person from the private person, and you have evidence of that. Or your legal entities are all these entities, the spirit, the soul, The body, the private name, and the legal name are all combined into one entity called an individual, which is a person, which is a natural person, which is a human being. You will not find the word man or woman in just about any law. They don't really do that. The only time I've ever seen it is in mixed phrases like manslaughter, okay? But they don't use the term man or the term woman. It's assault on a person. Go look up assault and battery. It's assault on a person. How do you assault a business? Because the person, the man or woman, thinks that they are the person, right? If you think that you're an elephant and I hit you, won't you think that an elephant just got assaulted? Sounds silly, but I mean that's what you kind of got to do to break this stuff down. Okay. So registering the name, if the legal name is the same as the business name, is voluntary, but you do need to do it, or else all those laws apply to govern you. Okay. Now, what's the cost of not governing, of the laws not governing you? Does it mean you can go out and just do whatever you want? No. The purpose for all this, our purpose here, I think my camera just glitched for just a moment. We're going to assume it's still working. Sorry about that. There's nothing worse than talking for an hour and a half, finding out afterwards you've talked an hour and a half to yourself. So, um, where are we at? They aren't going to recognize it as a business unless it's registered as one, period. Okay. And then they're still going to try to assume. And we get into how you handle matters once you've registered the name in other videos. We give courses, we have talks, and I write articles. Just follow us. So it's the same with the driver's license. They're not going to recognize that that's a business, which is a person, which we think of as us, needs a driver's license unless they register. If you register and get that driver's license, they're going to assume that you think you're a person. And there's ways around that. There's ways to do it correctly. Um, so I got a story. What licenses? Salt Lake City. There was a fellow in Salt Lake City who was against body scanners. I knew the guy, and he had these pamphlets that he had printed out so that when he went to the airport, he could stand outside security and he could hand out these pamphlets to people, and they started turning down the body scanner because those things probably aren't really healthy for you. They'll say that they are, but who knows? Probably aren't. So a police officer approached him and said, "Hey, our chief wants to talk to you." He said, "Okay, where's your chief at?" He said, "Well, he's at the office. Can you come back and talk to our chief?" And the guy, who's pretty strong advocate for honor and law and being responsible, he said, "Well, if the chief wants to talk to me, he needs to come here." So he waited there 8, 10, 12 minutes. And finally the chief shows up and he says, "Hey, I know you're out here handing out these pamphlets." And he said, "Yes." He said, "Well, what we would like for you to do is come back to the office and get a license to do this." And he said, "Do I need a license?" And the chief said, "Well, we would prefer you get one." He said, "Yeah, but I'm standing out here. This is covered by free speech, isn't it?" He said, "Well, yeah." He said, "But we would prefer that you get a license." And he said, "Well, okay, so if I go get the license and you want to arrest me, can you do that?" And he said, "Well, once you get the license, you have to abide by the terms and conditions of the license." So then why would I go get the license? He said, "Because we would prefer you do so." Now, the chief was talking in circles, of course, because he couldn't say the truth. He didn't want to say, "Well, we want you to go get the license so that we can control what you're doing. And if we don't like what you're doing, we can arrest you or stop you or whatever we want to do, ticket you, cite you. But as long as you don't have the license, you can't be ticketed or cited and they can't do anything about it." What do most people do when faced with that? They go get the license because most people are followers. And if you're going to stand up on your own 2 feet in this world, you're not going to be popular with governing authorities and you're not going to be popular with the other slaves. It's just the way it is. People like us who want to be more honorable and want truth, who want to stand in truth and recognize these things and think through these things and not just do what we're told, they're not real popular. Go read up on the Prussian school system. In fact, I have a video on the Prussian school system. Look in my YouTube packet, YouTube list. So, what's a natural person? A natural person is a slave. A human is a slave. A human being is a slave. A natural person is the subject of a property right. Okay. So The assumption of every government actor is that everyone needs a license. That's where you have to correct them and be able to provide them with the right materials. That's got to start with the registration of the name. Now, a lot of people say, well, what about trademarking the name? I recently wrote an article, it's on my Substack. It compares trademarking the name to registering the name. They're not of the same thing. It's not the same nature. You're not doing much for yourself by trademarking the name. I've never done it. I don't plan on trademarking the legal name. I see no reason to do it. I understand what happens when I register the legal name appropriately as a business. I've already done that. And I understand who I am. And most importantly, I understand who I am not. The only reason I see to trademark or copyright something is to prevent infringement by um, by someone also using that. And if you think that copywriting or trademarking your name is going to help you out in a court case or keep you from getting a traffic ticket or keep you from getting arrested, you're wrong. Well, nothing will actually keep you from those things. If a bad actor wants to perpetrate harm or violence or damage upon you, you can't stop them if they're dead set upon it. I mean, if somebody wants to punch you in the nose and they're willing to die for it, you're going to have a really hard time stopping them. Now, assume name laws. In a lot of the laws, what they'll say in the assumed name statutes is they'll give you a trick. They'll say no natural person may adopt a fictitious name that appears to be the name of a natural person unless the name includes an additional word or words that indicate that the fictitious name is not the name of a natural person. If that sounded confusing to you, congratulations. I've read it 300 times and it's confusing to me. We can dissect it, but I really don't want to. None of that applies to a man because a man is not a natural person. All right. Um, if you're a man, can you have debt? Right? If you're a man, can you own anything? How do you provide evidence that you're a man or a woman that isn't subject to those laws? File the ANC. It registers the name properly so it followed the law. As a matter of fact, the only law you actually have to follow, although most of them you want to follow, I don't want to drive drunk. I don't want to swing a bat around in public and risk hitting someone, right? But the one law that you should follow is the law that they tell you you don't have to follow, which is the registration of the business entity. Okay. So think about this, and I'm going to cover this again because I want to pound this nail way down. All right. The certificate of live birth did not register the name, it merely allowed the government to create the name. So who owns it? The creator owns it. The creator always gets the benefit of the creation. It allowed the government to create a name, an entity. It did not register that name for you to do business. At age 18, you should have registered it, and you've been engaging in business and fraud. Okay? So, a lot of people think, well, I can just create a trust. And trusts do have their place. The people like Bill Gates, those folks do foundations. That's the way the wealthy people do it. The way us poor people can do it is through ANC, right? So they have attorneys who establish foundations, and they should register their name, but they can kind of remove themselves from it because they have enough money to do so. But they really should register the name. All right. So let's say a process server knocks on your door. You can answer it if you know who you are. When a person sues another person, that's business. You can accept those papers on behalf of the person who is registered. So if someone says, "Are you John Edward Dosen?" I would say that is a business. And I'm an agent for that business, so I can accept those papers on behalf of that business. I have had instances where they wouldn't hand me the papers, but I was truthful. I stood in truth. When the court sends a summons and complaint and the sheriff is knocking on the door saying, "Are you John Dosen?" No, but if you have business with John Dosen, I can answer any questions that you might have. Are you trying to contract with John Dosen? Because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to contract. Now, I have a picture, a likeness of John Dosen, they might say, and it looks like you. Well, it looks like me, but it isn't me. I'm not a two-dimensional image. So, do you have something that proves that is John Dosen? Because I have something that proves it's not, and they don't have anything. Okay. It's assumed, just like United States citizenship is assumed. Who should have evidence that you are a citizen? And what proves that you're a U.S. citizen? Well, they'll say that a possession of a certificate of live birth proves U.S. citizenship, and that person is indeed a U.S. citizen, I would think. It's created by a subsidiary. of the U.S. government, which is the Commonwealth of Kentucky or the state of Nevada or whatever. But is the person or is the man a U.S. citizen? A man can't be a U.S. citizen. A woman can't be a U.S. citizen. It's not possible. So, is the certificate good in other states? Let's say you lay your head down at night in Idaho. Is the certificate of assumed name that you obtained in Minnesota good in Virginia? Well, absolutely. So let's just talk about who you're registering the name with when you register the name. You're registering with the Secretary of State. If you look in each state, the Secretary of State is over commerce. When you go get a certificate of live birth, that is a commercial document. In fact, I'm going to prove that it is a commercial document. Take me a second to bring this up. Go Google 1944 birth certificate. You can do this yourself. Now, I'm going to do it for you though. Birth certificate, and then the word commerce. Okay, I'm going to show you. First time I ever saw this was my mother's birth certificate. I want to show you something here. This is awesome, and there's little hints all over the place that what I'm explaining to you here. So here is a notification of birth registration. Okay. All right. Let's see if we can make that larger. Let's just do this. All right. It's not a very good image right there, is it? Oh, hold on. It's taking us to a whole nother site. That's always a chancy thing, right? It's not going to. Oh, here we go. Okay. This is a real certificate, a notification of birth registration. My mother, who was born in 1944, has one just like it, or had one. She's passed away. But somewhere I've still got it. Let's read this. Notification of birth registration in the United States of America. Department of Commerce. There you go. Now they've since taken that stuff off because they don't really want to get people thinking, right? Uh, it just isn't good to have people thinking. So, as far as their certificate being good in other states, yes, it is. Um, what if I wanted to play the game the way everyone else does? And I am born in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and I take the birth certificate, or certificate of live birth from the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and I've never had a license. So I go to Montana, the state of Montana, and I go in there. Do they say that I need a certificate of live birth from Montana? No, they do not. They honor the certificate of live birth from other states. The Secretary of State, the Department of Commerce, it used to be, as we saw in that 1944 certificate of live birth, it all falls under the Secretary of State. It's all commercial. And oftentimes in many states, the Division of Vital Statistics, which is where you get the certificate of live birth, is often underneath the Secretary of State. It may always be that way, actually, but it's all commerce. They have to accept it. Um, if you go to another state and get pulled over, do you have to have a driver's license from that state? Of course not. Um, in fact, it's actually good in other countries. Um, I would argue, I try not to argue, but it is good in other countries. If you are in Germany, can you register the name uh, in the not the United States, but can you register the name in the state of Minnesota? Absolutely, you can, right? So they're both issued by the same entity. So the certificate of assumed name is issued by the Secretary of State. It's the same entity that issues all certificates. All of them are issued by the Secretary of State. Um, let's look at the passport for a second. Okay. Did you know that the passport is not an ID? Why is the passport not an ID? Well, what is an ID? An ID has to have some elements, but let's compare an ID to the passport. I'm going to look up a US passport and I'm going to screen share. So let's look at a passport because a passport is probably the one piece of documentation that you need. Still zoomed in there. Let's go to images and let's see if we can snag a passport here. One that looks halfway decent here. All right, this one looks fine here. Oops, went away. Let's try that again. Ah, here we go. Let's look at this one. No, that's not. Here, let's just look. Those are passport cards. There we go. See if it'll pop up. All right. If it'll pop up, bear with me. All right. So look at this right here. Does this say, what does this say right here for name? It says surname. What does it say right here? It says given name. See, passports have to abide by international law. And in international law, they have to go by surname and given names, not legal names. All right. So what are we missing for this to be a valid ID? What's missing a legal name? What else is it missing? It's missing a domicile. There's no address on it. What else are we missing? We're missing a nationality. There's no nationality here. Now you may say, well, I see a nationality right there, United States of America. So if the nationality, what's the nationality of someone from Germany? German. What's the nationality of someone from Canada? Canadian. What's the nationality of someone from Australia? Australian. What's the definition of the what is the name for someone from America? American. But they put United States of America. That's a corporation. So we're missing three things here to make this a valid ID. We're missing a legal name, we're missing a nationality, and we're missing a domicile. It just isn't there. Okay. So let's connect all the dots here. All right. The church says that you have to prove your salvation by obedience. You have to continue to work in order to be saved. The court says you have to. Um, okay, so let's talk about the church first. Actually, what happens if you continue to try to work for your salvation? You're basically saying Jesus's payment wasn't enough. Okay, you're not subject to God's law. You can't be held accountable for not following God's law if all that debt has been saved by Jesus, it has been covered by Jesus. That payment is taking care of it all. You literally cannot sin if you have accepted Jesus' offer. Why? Because there's no such thing as sin for someone who's been saved. Can you do things God doesn't want you to do? Yes. Will you do things God doesn't want you to do? Well, I hope you don't go out and do tons of bad things, right? I mean, just because you're saved doesn't mean you can go out and engage in prostitution and rob a bank and beat people. That's not if someone is asking you that question, like, oh, so you're going to register the name and you're just going to be able to go around and do whatever you want. No, this is about honor, truth, and standing on our own 2 feet and governing ourselves under God's law. But we can't obey all of God's laws. That was the whole Old Testament. The whole Old Testament was telling us we can't obey God's law. We need a savior. If you're going to try to do it yourself, you're going to have to do it perfectly, because if you can't pay every cent of a debt that's owed and you won't let someone else pay it, then you're going to be guilty. But if you just let the person who offered to pay it, you're okay. Now, the court says that the system we have here says that you have to obey all of man's law. How many man's laws are there? I've heard it said that if you are in this system, if you're an adult, you're committing at least 3 felonies a day. 4, 5, 6, or 8 or more if you own a business, if you're running a business. You can't obey all of man's laws. But the one law you can obey, and the one law that you haven't obeyed yet, is the registering of the name. Once you register the name, you have documentation that you're not a person, and all those debts, all those laws, they don't apply to you. Okay? That'll be labeled conspiracy theory. Figure it out for yourself. You've got to be able to think through this and boil it down for yourself. So both systems say that you must comply in order to be accepted, right? But the fact of the matter is you can't comply. If a cop pulls you over, do you think he can't find something to write you a ticket for? Oh, I've been on that side of the fence. They absolutely can. If you look hard enough, you can, right? Both of those systems turn grace into performance. Um, Both of those systems create a false identity that you have to live up to. And both systems punish you for not performing perfectly. So you need a way out. In the spiritual, it's accepting Jesus' offer, all the debts are paid. Don't keep trying to pay via works because you're basically saying Jesus' payment, his work on the cross wasn't good enough. Don't try to obey all of man's laws because you can't. It's just not possible. It doesn't mean you go out and start hitting homeless people over the head, but it also doesn't mean that you have to continue to try. You obviously, there's some moral compass there, right? But both systems will punish you for not performing perfectly. If you think that you don't need Jesus' salvation, then on the day of judgment, when you're in court, you better hope you're not guilty, but you will be. So the legal name is a business entity, and that's the truth. This is just the truth. The legal name is a business entity. It's a tool. It's like a ship. That's why it's called a vessel, right? When you claim to be the name, you become liable for everything the name does. That's why in court, the judge will always ask you, tell you, please state your full name. You're assuming liability. And the moment you say, I am John Doe, you've entered their game. You are liable. In fact, if you enter a plea of not guilty, they should take you straight to jail because you've said you are the name. They asked you to enter a plea. You said not guilty. You're basically saying, I owe this debt, but I'm not going to pay it. Now they have to keep up the appearances that some people win and some people do. Same way in a casino. Not everybody that goes into a casino wins, but they've got to make it look like some people do, right? And some people actually do win, but your chances are pretty low, just like in the casino. So you're the one that's been accepting liability. You're the one who's volunteering. You've said, I am the vessel instead of saying, I am the living man or woman who uses the vessel. That's false personation. And it's the legal equivalent of what they do with trying to get you to be saved through your works. All right. You can't obey all of man's law. You can't obey all of God's law. You just can't. We're all guilty under the law. We are all guilty under the law. You've heard that said, right? Okay. By the way, when you plead guilty or not guilty, here's what's happening when you plead. You go to court. Let's just say it's for a criminal charge. You go to court and they will read you your rights, your person's rights. They will actually say that it is on the state to prove your guilt. So why is so many people going to court and losing? Because as soon as they say that, they then say, because the one who makes the statement has the obligation to prove the statement, right? If I work for you, and you say, John, go clean the windows, and I come back, and I have a rag in my hand, I have some Windex in my hand, and you say, did you clean the windows? And I say, yes, boss, I cleaned the windows. I now have to prove it, and if I don't prove it, like, can you ask me, hey, prove you to me you cleaned the windows? I have to walk outside and show you. I have to prove it. And if I can't prove it, what happens? I get in trouble. I can be fired, right? The one who's making the statement has the obligation to prove it. Now, what happens as soon as you say the name? You are the account. So they bring you into court, you agree to be the name, and then um, they say, okay, the state has the obligation to prove that you're guilty. All right. Then they say, what do you plead, guilty or not guilty? The second you give a plea, you're now the one making the statement. And that's why everything after that point is you trying to prove you're not guilty. By the way, you can't be innocent. You can holler innocent all you want to. Try to enter a plea of innocent in court. Tell them you're innocent and that you want to enter a plea of innocent. There's no one innocent in man's system. None. There's no one innocent in God's system either. So the court doesn't deal with living souls. It deals with contracts, it deals with obligations, it deals with commercial performance. And just like the lordship salvation trap, it traps you, that traps you into constant repentance, fear of not doing enough, bondage to rules. The commercial system traps you into what? Well, constant licensing, fear of non-compliance, and bondage to statutes. You end up living your whole life as if you're a corporation, not a creation of God. So, how do you escape it? Simple. You separate yourself from the vessel. You have to understand that the name is not you. Just like true salvation begins by accepting Jesus' offer to pay all the debt, legal liberty begins by recognizing who the hell you are. What did Jesus say? He said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar, and unto God what is God's. The legal name is Caesar's. You never gave it back. Registering gives it away. When you registered your car, you gave it away. When you registered your kid, you gave your kid away, at least certain rights to the kid. You actually split the title. Title gets split into two titles, an equitable title and a legal title. You only have the equitable title to your kids. The legal title is held by the state because you've agreed that they're persons. There are ways out of it. It's too much for this video right now. There are ways to handle things, and they're actually not that difficult. But you have to understand this part first. And it honestly takes a few weeks, few months. You might do it faster. I had registered the legal name that I use for 4 or 5 months before one day I was drinking coffee one evening and I spit it out. I realized suddenly all at once it hit me just how pivotal this is. Okay. The assumed name certificate, I realized, serves as evidence that you are not the identity. You're just the authorized user of that identity. Okay. You're just the name holder. You're not the name. This isn't magic. This isn't paperwork for freedom or sovereignty. It's just a declaration of truth. I know who I am and I know who I'm not. Right. So you got two systems here, two gospels, one religion, one in commerce, both come from the same source, right? Both are counterfeit, both demand works, both trap you in fear, and both create a false identity to control you. But God has already given you an identity. He says, as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God. You want to be a son of God. You're not a vessel, you're not a number, you're not a contract. You can be free if you want to. All it takes is what's up here, actually. I would even say you don't even have to register the legal name. Did Jesus do paperwork? No, but I can't contract on the same level as Jesus, and we are in a system that demands paperwork. The entire government only exists on paper. Um, so the church told you that you must work to be saved, and the court tells you that you have to be the name, right? And you got to perform because any performance put on the name is then attached to you, right? And so, God said, come out of her, my people, right? Out of the religious system that demands perfection, come out of the legal system that demands constant performance and works, and come into the truth, right? You are not the name. And that's what an assumed name certificate does. So stop trying to perform. You're already free. Think through all this, watch it again. There's more videos, and I pray that God will extend to you his blessings and protection. So I bid you farewell until next time.